Captain Avery Holt had always felt the hum of rotor blades in her soul. As a child in Arizona, she'd cling to her father's shoulders at the local airshow, eyes wide as the sun glinted off the sleek fuselage of A-64 Apache slicing through the sky. Every twist, turn, and barrel roll etched itself into her memory. By the time she was 12, she had memorized the specifications of every military helicopter in the fleet, scribbling them into a notebook she carried everywhere. Most kids collected baseball cards or comic books. Avery collected flight manuals and engine schematics. Her parents had worried, of course. Her mother, practical and fiercely protective, fretted over the danger, while her father, a former Air Force mechanic, quietly encouraged her obsession. "If you want it badly enough, you'll find a way," he'd told her when she begged for a ride in a civilian helicopter at 14. Avery had spent the next 4 summers learning to maintain the small helicopters at a local flight school, always returning to the hangar after the other kids went home, her sleeves smeared with grease, her eyes sparkling with determination. By the time she turned 18, she was more than ready to join the military. She applied to every program that could lead her toward the Apache. ROTC scholarships, flight schools, simulation programs. She conquered each obstacle with relentless precision, her instructors marveling at her ability to balance theoretical knowledge with instinctive skill. Avery's classmates sometimes mocked her for being too serious, but she ignored them. The only competition that mattered was the sky. Avery's first real test came during her flight school evaluations. The simulators were brutal, programmed with every possible emergency scenario from engine failures to anti-aircraft fire. Many cadets faltered under pressure, sweat streaming down their faces, hands trembling over the controls. Not Avery. She moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, her fingers dancing over the controls as she navigated impossible sequences. Her instructor, a grizzled veteran who had flown in combat zones no one spoke about, watched silently, then nodded. "You've got the touch," he said, and it felt like a victory. But she knew better than to relax. There were more layers to climb, more barriers to break. After years of relentless effort, Avery finally received the notification she had been waiting for, her assignment letter. She tore the envelope open with the urgency of someone reaching for a lifeline, heart hammering against her ribcage. Her eyes scanned the text, and then they froze. "You are not authorized to fly the Apache." The words were simple, but their impact was catastrophic. Avery's hands shook, her vision narrowing to a tunnel of disbelief. Not authorized. That didn't make sense. Not after everything she had accomplished, after every evaluation she had aced, after every sleepless night spent mastering maneuvers in simulators. The paper felt like a betrayal. She dropped it onto the desk, the edges crumpling under her grip, and pressed her palms to her face. No explanation, no appeal, just a blunt, immovable sentence. It was as if someone had decided that all her years of preparation didn't matter. Avery sank into the chair, trying to steady her breathing. She felt a mix of anger, confusion, and fear that her dreams were being systematically stripped away by an invisible hand. Why?" she whispered to herself, though no one was there to answer. Over the next few hours, she sought explanations. Her commanding officer offered little more than a sympathetic shrug. "This came from higher," he muttered, "higher than him, higher than anyone she had trained under. The Pentagon," she realized with growing unease. Someone with authority, someone untouchable, had blocked her path. But who? And why? Rumors spread across the base like wildfire. Some whispered it was politics, a clash of personalities. Others suggested that Major Riker, a man notorious for his ego and insecurities, had lobbied against her. He had been a rival since training school, and his disdain for her talent was no secret. Avery didn't confront him yet. She didn't have the energy. Instead, she buried herself in routine, physical training, simulator hours, maintenance drills, anything to feel control in a world that had suddenly stripped it from her. Even with her focus, the sting of the ban lingered. Every glance at the hangar doors, every Apache waiting for its pilot, reminded her of the opportunity snatched from her. Nights were the worst. Lying in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, she imagined herself in the cockpit, flying through clouds, performing evasive maneuvers, executing precision strikes. And then she remembered the envelope, the denial, and the dream felt further away than ever. Unbeknownst to Avery, her case had not gone unnoticed. At the Pentagon, in a stark office lined with awards and photographs of aerial campaigns, Admiral Jonathan Keating reviewed a flagged personnel file. Keating, a man with decades of combat experience and a reputation for fairness, had no reason to meddle in routine assignments. Yet Avery Holt's record had caught his eye, an anomaly flagged by automated systems detecting talent suppressed by internal politics. He studied the evaluations, the flight logs, the commendations. Every metric indicated excellence. Every note in her file spoke of skill, discipline, and courage, and yet she had been grounded without cause. Keating's eyes narrowed. He knew the type of officers who manipulated assignments for personal gain, jealous, threatened by competence, arrogant in their authority. And he knew that if someone like that succeeded in burying a pilot like Avery, it could cost lives. He tapped a pen against his desk, a habitual tick when thinking through difficult decisions. Avery Holt wasn't just another cadet. She was exceptional. She had to be protected, or at least given the chance to prove herself in the air. Meanwhile, back on the base, Avery felt the weight of invisible eyes judging her. Every interaction, every whisper in the halls reminded her she was being watched, assessed, and blocked. She didn't yet know that her fate was being considered at the very top, that an admiral's intervention might be imminent. She only knew the frustration, the sense of betrayal, and the gnawing fear that years of training could be wasted forever. By dusk, Avery sat alone on the tarmac, watching an Apache ascend, its rotors slicing the air with a familiar, intoxicating rhythm. She imagined herself at the controls, feeling the machine respond to her every command, and a spark of defiance ignited. They could ban her, delay her, humiliate her, but they couldn't take her passion. Not yet. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in crimson and gold, Avery pulled her jacket tighter against the chill. Somewhere far above, decisions were being made that could either destroy her dream or set it free. She didn't know it yet, but the storm that would change everything was already gathering. And when it struck, nothing in her life or career would ever be the same. A helicopter's shadow crossed her path as she stood, heart pounding. She clenched her fists, a silent vow forming in her mind. Whoever had banned her, whoever tried to stop her, would soon discover one undeniable truth: Captain Avery Holt was not finished. And somewhere in the Pentagon, Admiral Keating leaned back in his chair, reviewing a document that could overturn years of injustice. The phone on his desk vibrated. He picked it up, dialing a number that would soon ripple through the ranks, a decision that would draw Avery into the most consequential mission of her life, even before she realized it. The night air hummed with tension, the kind that precedes a storm. Avery looked up at the fading light, unaware that her life was about to pivot on 5 words spoken by a man she had never met. The morning sun cut through the desert haze, glinting off the helicopters lined up on the tarmac like a silent armada. Captain Avery Holt walked among them, each rotor and fuselage a reminder of what had been stolen from her. Her fingers traced the cold metal of a parked Apache, and she could almost hear it hum beneath her touch. She imagined herself in the cockpit, performing evasive maneuvers, executing precision drills, every instinct honed over years. Instead, she was grounded, blocked from the machine that defined her ambition. Her commanding officer, Colonel Mitchell, had tried to explain the ban. "Avery, it's not about you personally," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "It's politics. Higher-ups made a decision. We have no choice." "No choice?" Avery's voice rose, sharp as rotor blades slicing the morning air. "I earned every hour of flight time, every commendation. I trained harder than anyone here. How is this not personal?" Mitchell sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's complicated. There are things you don't understand. Just trust me when I say it's above my pay grade." But Avery couldn't trust it. She didn't need politics, bureaucracy, or excuses. She needed answers. She needed the cockpit. She needed the air beneath the rotors and the adrenaline in her veins. Word of her grounding spread quickly across the base. Whispered conversations, half smiles, and sidelong glances followed her everywhere. Some colleagues offered sympathetic nods. Others seemed almost eager to see her fail. Rumors floated like dust in the wind. Some said it was Major Riker, her longtime rival, who had petitioned against her. He was always threatened by her talent, a man whose ego outweighed his competence. Others suggested it was a bureaucratic error, a casualty of a system that rewarded politics over skill. Avery didn't know what to believe. All she knew was that the path she had worked for since she was a child was blocked. Riker had the audacity to greet her in the mess hall later that day. "Captain Holt," he said, voice dripping with feigned cordiality, "I hear the Pentagon made a choice for you. Maybe it's for your own good." Avery's fingers curled around the edge of the table. "For my own good," she spat. "You've been trying to bury me since training school. You think blocking me makes you a better pilot." Riker smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I'm just practical. Sometimes talent has to be tempered by reality. You'll thank me someday." She wanted to scream. She wanted to fly straight at him, but she kept her composure. She would not give him the satisfaction. Not yet. Instead, she turned and left, each step heavy with the weight of stolen dreams. She spent the rest of the day buried in her routines, maintaining helicopters, running drills, anything to remind herself she was still capable, still alive, still a pilot, even if she couldn't take flight. As the sun dipped low over the horizon, Avery sat on the edge of the tarmac, watching the shadow of a hovering Apache stretch across the ground. She imagined herself inside, the wind whipping past, the controls responding to her every command. The image was almost painful in its clarity. She closed her eyes and whispered a vow. "They will not stop me. Not permanently. Not if I have to fight through fire and blood to get back in that cockpit." Unbeknownst to her, the storm that could change her life was already gathering thousands of miles away. Admiral Jonathan Keating sat in a stark office at the Pentagon, papers spread across his polished desk, red flags marking specific personnel files. His reputation for fairness had earned him respect and fear across the military hierarchy. He had flown combat missions, led covert operations, and made decisions that had saved countless lives. Today, however, he was focused on a single file, Captain Avery Holt. Her record was extraordinary. Years of perfect evaluations, relentless training, and commendations in advanced flight simulations, all buried under a bureaucratic error or perhaps deliberate sabotage. Keating leaned back in his chair, studying the documents. A minor note from Major Riker was highlighted in red. It seemed insignificant at first glance, but to someone who knew how internal politics worked, it screamed manipulation. Keating's jaw tightened. He had seen talent suppressed before. He had seen lives endangered because jealous officers manipulated assignments. And he knew that grounding Avery Holt for political convenience wasn't just unfair, it was dangerous. A pilot of her caliber grounded unnecessarily could mean disaster in combat, an opportunity lost when lives hung in the balance. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he rarely used, reserved for urgent personnel interventions. "Keating," he said when the voice on the other end answered. "I need an expedited review. Captain Avery Holt, red flagged for political suppression. Make it happen." Back on the base, Avery received a summons the next morning, an unusual request to report to headquarters. She approached the building with cautious optimism and dread. She didn't know who had ordered the meeting or what it would entail. Her heart pounded in her chest, echoing the rotor hum she longed to hear. When she arrived, the door opened to reveal Admiral Keating himself. Avery froze, staring at the figure she had only seen in photographs and news footage. He was tall, commanding, with eyes sharp enough to cut through deception. He gestured for her to sit. "Captain Holt," he said, his voice calm but authoritative, "I've been reviewing your file." Her pulse quickened. "Sir, I don't understand. Why am I grounded?" Keating studied her, not just her words but her posture, her hands, the subtle tension in her jaw. "Someone attempted to block your career without cause. Your evaluations, your training, your service, all exceptional. Nothing justifies this." Avery's throat tightened. She felt a flicker of hope tinged with disbelief. "Then will I be allowed to fly?" Keating leaned forward slightly. "That's what I intend to ensure. But first, I need the full picture. I need to understand the challenges you've faced, the obstacles placed before you, and why a pilot of your caliber was denied the opportunity she earned." The next hour felt like both a trial and a revelation. Avery recounted her experiences, every simulator, every evaluation, every subtle sabotage, every whispered rumor, and every encounter with Major Riker. Keating listened intently, taking notes, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he leaned back, tapping his pen. "You've shown resilience, skill, and integrity under pressure," he said finally. "Qualities every pilot should possess. This isn't just about justice. It's about ensuring the right people are in the right seats when it matters most." Avery swallowed hard. "Sir, you mean I have a chance?" Keating's gaze softened for the briefest moment. "Not just a chance, Captain Holt. You deserve it, but there are still obstacles. Internal politics run deep. You will face scrutiny, resistance, and perhaps even hostility from those who wanted you grounded. Are you prepared for that?" Her jaw set. "I've been ready my whole life. I'll face whatever it takes." Keating nodded almost approvingly. "Good, because this isn't just about one assignment. It's about demonstrating that talent and courage are never to be stifled. Prepare yourself. I'll be issuing directives to override any restrictions. Soon, you'll be back where you belong, at the controls." Avery left the headquarters with a sense of disbelief and cautious hope. For the first time in weeks, the weight of the ban lifted slightly. But she knew the battle wasn't over. There would be resistance, and she had to prove herself, again and again. She could almost hear the rotors calling her name, a promise of freedom in the sky. That evening, as she returned to her quarters, Avery sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts raced. The Admiral's intervention, the looming confrontation with Riker, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. But beneath the fear, a flame of determination burned brighter than ever. She would fly, she would prove herself. And when she did, no one, no rival, no bureaucrat, no political maneuver, would ever ground her again. And far away, in the Pentagon, Admiral Keating reviewed the orders that would soon set the wheels in motion. Avery Holt's fate was about to change, and the ripple of that decision would reach every corner of the base, every officer, and every helicopter on the tarmac. The desert night settled over the base, silent but electric. Somewhere high above, the wind whispered across the rotor blades, carrying the promise of battles yet to be fought and victories yet to be won. Avery Holt didn't know it yet, but her life was about to pivot in ways she could never have imagined. And just beyond the horizon, Major Riker's smirk was about to meet its first real challenge. Avery Holt woke to the first gray light of dawn spilling across the desert tarmac. The chill in the air made her wrap her jacket tighter around her shoulders, but it did nothing to dampen the fire inside her. Since meeting Admiral Keating, she felt a flicker of hope, but hope, she had learned, was fragile. One wrong move, one miscalculated word, and the fragile balance of her career could tip back into chaos. The base was unusually quiet. Helicopters sat in neat rows, their rotors still, yet Avery could feel the latent power humming through them like restrained energy. She walked among them slowly, tracing the Apache's sleek lines, imagining the controls beneath her fingers. She could feel the memories of simulators, the hours of training, the sweat and adrenaline of near-impossible maneuvers, the echoes of every test that had proven her skill. But reality grounded her. She was still banned. The hum of rotor blades in her mind clashed with the silence around her. She had learned the hard way that talent alone could not dismantle politics, that bureaucracy could bury a career faster than any enemy in combat. Her phone buzzed, startling her. It was an encrypted message from Admiral Keating. "Report to my office immediately. No intermediaries. This concerns your reinstatement." Avery's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed that this could be the moment she had been waiting for, yet fear gnawed at her confidence. The path ahead was uncertain. She arrived at the Pentagon office, the same stark, intimidating space she had seen once before. Keating's assistant stepped aside and she entered. The Admiral sat behind a massive oak desk, papers spread before him. His gaze met hers, calm but intense. There was a weight in his eyes, a mixture of expectation, scrutiny, and unspoken warning. "Captain Holt," he began, gesturing for her to sit, "I've reviewed every report, every log, every evaluation. You've been groundlessly blocked from flying the Apache. That's not acceptable." Avery exhaled, trying to steady the surge of emotion. "Sir, what happens now?" Keating's fingers drummed on the desk. "Now we reclaim what was denied to you, but it won't be easy. The people who suppressed you have allies, and not all of them are visible. You will face resistance and you will be scrutinized. Some will try to test your resolve, your skill, and your patience." Avery swallowed. "I understand, I'm ready." Keating leaned forward. "Good. There's more. Major Riker has entrenched influence within the flight division. He has lobbied against you personally. We need a strategy to not only reinstate you, but also to ensure your authority is recognized the moment you step back into the cockpit." Her stomach clenched. Riker. She had feared him, and yet she had underestimated the reach of his manipulations. "What do you want me to do?" Keating paused, studying her reaction. "First, we validate your skill publicly, a series of controlled simulations and evaluation flights. You'll demonstrate your capability under scrutiny, leaving no doubt about your right to fly the Apache. Second, we establish a direct line of communication. You will bypass normal channels when necessary. And third," he hesitated, "you must remain vigilant. Politics are insidious. Some will seek to undermine you, even if they appear supportive." Avery nodded, determination solidifying into resolve. "Understood, I can handle it." Keating's expression softened slightly. "I don't doubt it, but remember, this is more than personal vindication. It's about ensuring the best pilot is in the right seat when lives are on the line. This isn't just your career, it's operational readiness." She felt the weight of his words press down on her. Flying wasn't just about personal glory. It was about responsibility, precision, and trust. Lives would depend on her decisions in a split second. And now, with the added pressure of political scrutiny, one mistake could erase everything she had fought for. The following days became a whirlwind. Avery was summoned to back-to-back briefings, simulations, and assessments, each designed to test not just her skill but her composure under scrutiny. Every move she made was observed by officers, evaluators, and even spies within her own unit. The sense of being constantly watched was suffocating. Riker's presence loomed like a shadow at every evaluation. He observed from the periphery, his smirk a constant reminder that her reinstatement was not a certainty. He questioned minor details, highlighted procedural errors, and subtly undermined her at every turn. Avery's patience frayed, yet she held her composure. Every word, every action had to be precise. Any misstep could be seized upon as justification to block her again. The first simulation was brutal. She was strapped into a replica cockpit, sensors recording every movement, every response to emergencies programmed into the system. The scenario escalated rapidly. A mechanical failure in hostile airspace, simulated anti-aircraft fire, and a squadron counting on her guidance. Avery's hands moved with instinctive precision, correcting, compensating, executing maneuvers she had mastered over years of training. She felt the thrill, the adrenaline, the connection between pilot and machine, yet this was more than a test. It was a declaration, a statement to anyone doubting her competence. The simulation concluded and evaluators huddled, whispering. Avery stepped out, heart pounding. She had passed every technical metric, but she knew the real battle was not in simulation. It was in perception, in politics, in proving that she belonged despite the attempts to bury her. Keating's voice came over the secure line shortly after. "Captain Holt, you performed exceptionally. The evaluations are moving forward. The board is impressed. Now we prepare for the next phase, direct oversight in an actual Apache." Her pulse raced. Real flight, the ultimate test. She would finally face the machine that had defined her dreams. But Riker was not finished. The moment Avery returned to her quarters, she found a carefully worded note slipped under her door. "Remember, talent isn't enough. Some of us play a different game." A chill ran down her spine. He had allies, manipulators hiding in plain sight, watching her every move. She knew the fight was far from over. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, reviewing maneuvers in her mind, rehearsing responses and planning for every scenario. She felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration, a tightrope suspended over a chasm. One misstep, one moment of weakness, and her career could be over before she touched the cockpit again. Yet beneath the fear was defiance. Avery Holt had survived years of obstacles, betrayal, and doubt. She had been underestimated, mocked, and blocked, but never defeated. She closed her eyes, visualizing the Apache's rotors, feeling the hum beneath her hands, the vibration through her core, the precision required for every maneuver. Somewhere in the Pentagon, Keating watched the reports and simulations, noting every detail, every improvement, every hesitation. He prepared his next move, aware that restoring Avery Holt to her rightful position would disrupt entrenched hierarchies and provoke resistance. But he also knew her worth. Talent like hers could not remain grounded without risking operational failure. And so the stage was set. Avery Holt would soon face not only the machine she loved, but also the politics, rivalries, and scrutiny that threatened to crush her. Every flight would be a proving ground, every decision a declaration. As dawn approached, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, Avery felt the weight of the coming days settle on her shoulders, but she welcomed it. She had been waiting for this moment her entire life. The Apache, the adrenaline, the responsibility, it was all within reach again. But just beyond the horizon, Major Riker's presence lingered like a storm cloud. His influence had not waned. The game was far from over. And as Avery prepared for the first flight back toward the cockpit she had earned, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, and that the battles to come would test her in ways she could never have imagined. And somewhere in the shadows of the Pentagon, Keating's voice echoed over secure communications. "Prepare her. It's time she flies again." The night was silent, the desert air tense with anticipation. Avery Holt didn't know it yet, but every rotor, every maneuver, every glance from a superior or rival would now carry the weight of her entire career, and her destiny was about to take flight. The sun had barely risen over the desert base when Avery Holt received the official order: report to the Apache hangar immediately. Her pulse raced as she navigated the familiar maze of concrete, hangars, and parked helicopters. Every step was weighted with anticipation, every glance over her shoulder tinged with the knowledge that she was still under scrutiny. The air carried the faint hum of idle engines, a sound she had dreamed of hearing again for months. As she approached the hangar, a black SUV pulled up, and a uniformed officer gestured her over. She stepped out of the vehicle and was led toward the main doors. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders, mingling with the tension that always accompanied her first moments before a flight. This time, however, it was compounded by months of political obstacles, whispered rumors, and outright sabotage. When the doors swung open, Avery froze. Standing inside, calmly reviewing a file, was Admiral Jonathan Keating. The figure she had only ever known from reports, briefings, and photographs now stood in front of her. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned her with a clarity that made her stomach twist. She instinctively straightened her posture, hands clenched at her sides, ready for whatever challenge awaited. "Captain Holt," Keating said, closing the file and gesturing toward the cockpit. "I've been monitoring your evaluations. You've proven your skill, your resilience, and your dedication. But now it's time for the real test, control of the Apache itself." Her heart thudded. After months of being grounded, of being sidelined while Riker and others whispered and plotted, she was finally being granted the opportunity she had fought for. Yet fear mingled with anticipation. This wasn't just a test of skill. It was a trial by fire under the weight of political oversight, scrutiny, and history. "Sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I won't disappoint you." Keating's gaze softened slightly. "I don't expect you to, but remember, this isn't a victory lap. There are eyes on you, friends and adversaries alike. Demonstrate your capabilities. Show them that attempts to suppress talent can't succeed." He gestured toward the massive Apache in the center of the hangar. Its sleek frame gleamed under the lights, rotors still but brimming with latent power, waiting for someone capable to bring them to life. Avery felt her breath catch. She had been close to this machine countless times, touched every control in simulators, memorized every nuance. Yet now, facing the real thing, her heart raced with both fear and exhilaration. A group of officers stood nearby, observing silently. Among them was Major Riker, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, a faint smirk etched across his face. Avery's stomach tightened. He had watched her struggle and stumble in the past. Now he would watch her succeed or fail under the scrutiny of the Admiral himself. Keating handed her a sealed envelope containing clearance orders. "This authorizes your immediate flight," he said. "It overrides all previous restrictions. No one can stop you now." Avery's hand shook slightly as she accepted the envelope. The moment felt surreal. She tore it open, scanning the text quickly. Every word confirmed what she had hoped for. She was free to take the controls, and her assignment was validated directly by the Admiral. "Captain Holt," Keating added, his voice calm but firm, "the board is watching. Riker is present. Others are observing. Demonstrate not just skill but authority. Make every second count." Avery nodded, swallowing her nerves. She approached the cockpit, running her hands over the control surfaces, feeling the cold metal and tactile switches beneath her fingertips. It was more than a machine. It was a symbol of her dreams, her perseverance, and the battles she had fought both in the air and against politics on the ground. The pre-flight checks began. Avery went through each step with precision, speaking her commands aloud as the sensors recorded every action. Engines roared to life, rotors lifting slowly, then steadily, as the Apache responded to her touch. She felt the vibration through her core, the resonance of power controlled by skill and instinct. For months, she had imagined this moment. Now it was real. Riker stepped closer, his smirk fading as he watched her work. Every movement was fluid, confident, precise. He had tried to undermine her, to cast doubt on her abilities, but here she was, perfect in execution, commanding the machine she had been denied for so long. Keating observed from the side, a rare look of satisfaction crossing his face. "Well done, Captain Holt," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "But don't celebrate yet. The flight itself will test you under pressure. Remember, this isn't a demonstration, it's a validation." Avery nodded, stepping fully into the cockpit. She ran through the final checks, feeling the familiar thrill coursing through her veins. She had trained for this moment her entire life. Now, with the Admiral's endorsement and the board observing, it was real. The liftoff was smooth but tense. Every officer in the hangar, every camera observing remotely, would note every movement, every command. Avery felt the wind rush past, the vibration of rotors in perfect harmony with her control inputs. The Apache responded as if it had been waiting for her all along, every maneuver executed with precision born of years of practice. Minutes passed, each one stretching like an eternity. Avery executed complex maneuvers, responding to simulated emergencies, demonstrating her mastery. She could feel Riker's eyes, skeptical and critical, scanning every move, yet she didn't falter. This was her moment, not his, not anyone else. As the flight concluded, Avery landed with flawless execution. The board and officers erupted in subdued murmurs of approval. Riker's expression was unreadable, somewhere between shock and irritation. He had doubted her, tried to manipulate her career, and yet here she stood, triumphant in every measurable way. Keating approached, his gaze steady, almost approving. "Captain Holt," he said, "you've demonstrated exactly why politics cannot suppress talent. This is only the beginning, but your authority has been validated. Remember that the real challenge isn't just the flight, it's maintaining it against interference, skepticism, and those who resist your presence." Avery exhaled deeply, letting the tension leave her body. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of completion, of justice, and of vindication. She had fought through obstacles both visible and hidden, and now she had claimed her rightful place. Yet even in this moment of triumph, the shadows of opposition lingered. Riker had not disappeared. Others had observed her with suspicion. The world of military aviation was rife with politics, and Avery understood that every flight forward would carry the weight of scrutiny, rivalry, and challenge. As she stepped from the Apache, the wind lifting her hair and dust swirling around her boots, she felt the eyes of the base on her, and she realized something vital. This was her proving ground. Not just the machine, not just the flight, but every action, every decision, every interaction. She had earned her right to fly, but earning respect, authority, and recognition in a system designed to test her at every turn, that was a battle still unfolding. Keating watched silently as she walked away from the Apache, then spoke to the observing officers. "Captain Holt will fly, and those who doubt her should take note. Talent, skill, and determination cannot be suppressed indefinitely." Avery didn't hear him. Her mind was already racing ahead, to the next mission, the next challenge, the next flight. She had reclaimed her cockpit, but the war for her career's survival and validation was far from over. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desert hangars, Avery felt a surge of clarity. She had faced denial, sabotage, and doubt. She had confronted the politics of the system, the smirks of rivals, and the uncertainty of her own fears. And now, standing at the threshold of her future, she realized that she was not just a pilot, she was a force. Somewhere beyond the horizon, she knew Riker's schemes had not ended. But she had the machine, the skill, and now the backing of an admiral who recognized her worth. The next moves were hers to command. And as the rotors of the Apache hummed beneath her feet, Avery Holt smiled, knowing that the sky was no longer a dream denied, but a challenge she was ready to conquer. And deep in the Pentagon, Keating's phone buzzed with updates on personnel movements. He tapped a finger thoughtfully on the desk, aware that Avery Holt's reinstatement would ripple through the chain of command, exposing hidden resentments, alliances, and ambitions. The real battle, he knew, had only just begun. The desert wind carried the promise of flight, of confrontation, and of a destiny reclaimed. Avery Holt didn't yet know every challenge awaiting her, but for the first time she felt ready to face them all. The first week back in the Apache cockpit was grueling. Avery Holt moved with a precision born of years of training, yet every action was scrutinized. Cameras, evaluators, and senior officers watched her from observation decks, recording her every maneuver, nodding every command. She felt the pressure like a physical weight pressing against her shoulders. This wasn't just about flying, it was about proving to the entire base, and to Major Riker in particular, that she belonged. Riker hovered in the background like a storm cloud, his presence a constant reminder that her return wouldn't be smooth. He observed every adjustment she made, every calculated turn, every subtle hesitation, and filed it away for later leverage. He whispered questions to colleagues at the edge of the deck, carefully planting seeds of doubt. Avery had expected resistance, but the intensity of it, the subtle malice was staggering. Meanwhile, Admiral Keating maintained a distant but watchful presence. He had personally overridden the restrictions placed on her, sending ripples through the hierarchy that unsettled some officers and emboldened others. His endorsement lent Avery authority, yet it also placed a target on her back. Every flight, every decision, every interaction would now carry the weight of proving the system right for trusting her. On the morning of her first evaluation flight, Avery ran through pre-flight checks meticulously. Her palms were slick with sweat, her heart pounding. The Apache sat before her, rotors spinning slowly, like a coiled spring ready to leap. She could almost feel the hum of potential energy vibrating beneath her fingers, as if the machine itself anticipated the battle ahead. "Captain Holt," called a senior evaluator, "remember, this isn't a demonstration, it's a validation. Precision, judgment, and authority will be measured. You will execute a series of maneuvers under simulated combat conditions. Any error could be used against you." Avery nodded, swallowing hard. The stakes were enormous. This flight wasn't just about skill. It was about survival in a politically charged environment where one misstep could undo months of struggle. The mission began with simulated engagement in hostile territory. Enemy positions, anti-aircraft fire, and mechanical failures were programmed into the simulation, each scenario escalating in intensity. Avery's hands moved instinctively over the controls, responding to every alert, every failure, every threat. She coordinated with simulated squadron units, directing their maneuvers, prioritizing targets, and maintaining situational awareness with a clarity born of countless hours of preparation. From the observation deck, Keating watched silently. He could see the precision, the instinctive judgment, the calm authority in Avery's execution. Yet he also knew that political and personal resistance, especially from figures like Riker, would not vanish merely because she succeeded. Minutes into the flight, a critical simulated malfunction was triggered, hydraulic failure in one of the Apache's control systems. Avery's instincts kicked in immediately. She assessed the situation, adapted her controls, and compensated with subtle adjustments. The Apache responded flawlessly, executing emergency procedures she had rehearsed countless times in simulators. She didn't just manage the failure, she turned it into a display of skill, authority, and composure. The observation deck was tense. Evaluators whispered among themselves, noting every adjustment and correction. Riker's face, visible through the observation window, shifted from smug confidence to tight-lipped shock. For months, he had believed he could suppress her career. Now every metric, every maneuver, every decision demonstrated her competence beyond question. When the flight concluded, Avery executed a precise landing, bringing the Apache to a complete stop with exacting accuracy. The room erupted in controlled murmurs, approval tempered by the formality of military observation. Riker looked pale, a faint shadow of disbelief crossing his features. He had underestimated her, and the realization was both personal and professional. Keating approached afterward, his gaze steady. "Captain Holt," he said quietly, "you've demonstrated skill, judgment, and composure, but remember, the fight isn't over. Authority, recognition, and influence are just as critical as maneuvering a rotorcraft. There will be officers who continue to test you, to challenge your presence. This flight is a validation, but not the end." Avery exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders in a slow release. She had passed the first test, but the broader battle, political, personal, and professional, was just beginning. She knew that Riker would not surrender quietly. He would continue to undermine, to challenge, to seek ways to block her progress. Her next challenge arrived the following day. Orders had been issued for a live operational exercise in a neighboring training zone, designed to simulate real-world combat conditions. Avery was to lead a squadron of junior pilots, some of whom had openly doubted her authority. The exercise would test not just her technical skills, but her ability to command, coordinate, and maintain authority under scrutiny. As she briefed her squadron, Avery felt a mixture of nerves and determination. She delivered instructions with clarity and precision, projecting authority, projecting competence, projecting confidence. Her team responded with discipline, and she could see the shift in their demeanor, from skepticism to respect, the subtle recognition of leadership in action. The exercise began. Enemy targets appeared, obstacles emerged, and simulated casualties forced rapid decision-making. Avery navigated the Apache with flawless precision, coordinating the squadron, directing maneuvers, and adapting to unforeseen complications with instinctive authority. Every move, every call, every adjustment demonstrated that she was not only capable of flying the Apache, but also of leading others through the most complex operations. In the observation tower, evaluators noted the shift in the squadron's behavior. Even the most skeptical officers were forced to acknowledge Avery's leadership and competence. Riker, standing in the background, could do nothing but watch as her authority became undeniable. After the exercise, Keating approached again. "Captain Holt," he said, voice low but carrying weight, "you've demonstrated leadership under scrutiny, technical skill, and composure. This isn't just a victory for you, it's a signal to the entire base. Attempts to suppress talent will not succeed when skill and determination are proven." Avery felt a surge of quiet triumph. Months of obstacles, months of political games, months of doubt and sabotage had culminated in this moment. She had reclaimed her cockpit, her authority, and her right to fly, but the path forward would not be easy. Riker and others would continue to resist. She would continue to be tested. Yet she had proven beyond doubt that she belonged. That evening, as she walked across the tarmac, the wind tugging at her hair and dust swirling around her boots, Avery felt a sense of calm determination. The Apache waited silently, rotors still but ready, a coiled force that mirrored her own readiness. She had reclaimed her place, but the future would demand vigilance, skill, and courage at every turn. Somewhere within the Pentagon, Keating reviewed reports of the day's exercises, noting the subtle shifts in authority and perception. He knew that Avery Holt's reinstatement would continue to unsettle entrenched hierarchies and provoke resistance, but he also knew that a pilot of her caliber could not be denied, and that her determination would drive her to meet every challenge. And far above the desert horizon, the night sky stretched like a canvas, promising more challenges, more tests, and more opportunities for Avery Holt to prove herself. The journey was far from over, but she was ready. She had been grounded, blocked, and underestimated. She had been challenged by rivals and constrained by politics. But now, with the Apache beneath her, her authority recognized, and her skill undeniable, Avery Holt was prepared to confront the obstacles ahead, and to reclaim not just her cockpit, but the destiny that had always been hers. Yet in the shadows, Riker's resentment simmered, and his determination to undermine her was far from extinguished. The next confrontation was inevitable. Avery knew it, and she welcomed it. For every challenge, every rival, every whispered doubt only fueled her resolve. She had fought too long, endured too much, and trained too hard to be stopped now. The desert wind carried the promise of flight, of authority reclaimed, and of battles still to come. Avery Holt didn't yet know every test awaiting her, but for the first time in months, she felt ready to face them all. The desert sun burned high above the base as Avery Holt climbed into the Apache, the hum of the rotors vibrating beneath her hands like a heartbeat. Each liftoff reminded her of everything she had endured, the months of denial, the whispers of sabotage, the doubts cast by people who had never seen her true potential. Today's mission wasn't just a training exercise. It was the first real test under operational conditions with her authority officially recognized. And yet, the shadow of Riker and others, resentment still loomed. Her squadron, handpicked by Admiral Keating, awaited her orders. They were competent, disciplined, but some still carried skepticism about her return. Avery could sense it in the way they adjusted their helmets, the brief glances, the subtle hesitation in their posture. She had anticipated this. Leadership was not just about flying, it was about command, projection of confidence, and unwavering decisiveness. "All right, squad," Avery said, her voice firm, cutting through the roar of the rotors. "Today's mission is a live combat simulation. Enemy positions, civilian variables, and environmental hazards will challenge you. Follow my lead, trust the plan, and execute your maneuvers precisely. Any hesitation will cost us time, and in real operations, hesitation costs lives." The words carried authority. They shifted the room. Skepticism faded into focus. Every pilot knew that failure was not an option, and Avery was the only one qualified to lead them through this complex exercise. As they lifted off, the ground falling away beneath them, Avery ran through protocols with precision. Enemy targets appeared in rapid succession, and she maneuvered the Apache with a fluidity that combined technical mastery with instinctive decision-making. Simultaneously, she coordinated her squadron, issuing concise, clear commands that positioned each aircraft optimally. The mission escalated quickly, as intended, simulating combat scenarios she had only faced in controlled training until now. Then, without warning, the first sign of sabotage appeared. A minor hydraulic failure flashed on her panel, one that should have been impossible on a newly maintained Apache. Her instincts kicked in immediately. She ran emergency protocols, compensating for the malfunction while maintaining control and continuing to coordinate her squadron. Every move was calculated, precise, and fast, too fast for anyone not intimately familiar with her skill to comprehend. Riker's influence became apparent in the subtle interference planted within the exercise parameters. Certain squadron pilots, carefully instructed by others, hesitated at crucial moments. Enemy positions appeared unexpectedly, and communication channels were disrupted just enough to create tension. The simulation was no longer purely a test of skill. It had become a test of leadership, composure, and the ability to adapt under pressure. Avery felt her pulse spike. This was exactly the type of scenario she had trained for, the high-stakes, chaotic environment that would separate competence from mediocrity. She assessed the hydraulic issue while issuing commands to her squadron. Her voice remained steady, even as alarms blared and the simulated environment became more hostile. "Alpha 1, reposition to Grid 4, she directed. "Bravo 2, provide suppression fire on target Delta. Maintain altitude control, compensate for mechanical variance, and follow my lead. Execute immediately." Her squadron responded, and slowly, with Avery's guidance, they regained operational cohesion. The Apache responded to her inputs perfectly, as if she and the machine were an extension of each other. She had anticipated sabotage, and her ability to adapt turned a potential disaster into a controlled tactical advantage. Minutes stretched like hours as Avery executed maneuvers, coordinated strikes, and compensated for both mechanical failures and human error. By the time the simulation concluded, she had not only succeeded in completing the mission, but had done so with a level of precision and leadership that left observers, including Admiral Keating, impressed. As she landed, the rotors spinning down and the ground rushing up to meet the Apache, Avery felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced sabotage, political manipulation, and operational complexity all at once, and she had triumphed. On the ground, evaluators gathered, nodding every metric, every reaction, every decision. Even Riker, who had orchestrated subtle obstacles and delays, could not deny her performance. He approached, his expression tight with barely restrained frustration. "You performed well," he said, his voice clipped. "I'll admit it, but don't think this changes anything. Politics will still play a role here." Avery met his gaze without flinching. "Politics can delay me," she said evenly, "but they won't stop me. Not my skills, not my leadership, and not my commitment to this mission. You may try to obstruct, but I'll always find a way through." Riker's smirk faltered. For the first time, Avery sensed genuine uncertainty in him. Months of manipulation, sabotage, and underhanded tactics had failed to derail her. She had reclaimed her authority, proven her capability, and done so under circumstances designed to trip her up. Keating approached afterward, his expression serious but approving. "Captain Holt," he said, "you've done more than reclaim your cockpit. You've demonstrated leadership under extreme pressure, adaptability under sabotage, and a command presence that cannot be ignored. This is exactly the validation I intended." Avery exhaled, relief mingling with renewed determination. The mission was a success, but the battle for her full recognition was ongoing. The base would not forget Riker's attempts to undermine her, nor would they forget her triumph. Her authority was established, but the political landscape was far from settled. That evening, as she cleaned the Apache and ran final diagnostics, Avery reflected on the day's events. Every challenge she had faced, the months of grounding, the sabotage, the whispered doubts, had strengthened her resolve. She had survived under scrutiny, adapted under pressure, and emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever. Yet she knew the real challenge was just beginning. With Riker's resentment simmering and political undercurrents still active, every mission, every decision, and every flight would be a test, not just of skill, but of resilience, strategy, and endurance. She had reclaimed her place, but maintaining it required constant vigilance. The desert wind whispered across the hangar, carrying dust and the distant hum of rotors. Avery felt the Apache beneath her hands, the machine responding to her touch with precision and power. She had been denied, sabotaged, and underestimated, but she had proven her skill and her authority. And somewhere in the shadows, Riker and his allies were plotting their next move. Avery Holt knew the battles would continue, but for the first time in months, she felt ready to face them all. She had survived denial, sabotage, and doubt. She had reclaimed her cockpit, her authority, and her career. But the storm of politics, rivalries, and hidden enemies was far from over. And as she watched the desert sun sink behind the horizon, Avery understood one undeniable truth. She had survived the first wave, but the next one, more dangerous, more insidious, and more personal, was already approaching. The night air carried the scent of sand and oil, the hum of distant engines, and the promise of challenges yet to come. Avery Holt didn't yet know every obstacle awaiting her, but for the first time, she felt ready, resolute, and unstoppable. And in the Pentagon, Admiral Keating reviewed reports of the day's mission. He knew Riker's network of influence was still active, and he knew that Avery Holt's trials were far from over. But he also knew something else. She was extraordinary, and extraordinary talent could not be contained. Not now, not ever. The desert sky darkened, stars beginning to emerge, reflecting the same spark of determination burning in Avery Holt's eyes. The battle for her career, her authority, and her legacy was far from over, but she was ready to meet it head-on. The dawn over the desert was sharp and unforgiving, a harsh contrast to the calm determination in Avery Holt's eyes. Today was no routine exercise. Today, the Pentagon had authorized a high-stakes operational test, a live simulation incorporating real-time coordination with multiple units, complex enemy scenarios, and unforeseen environmental hazards. Avery would not only fly the Apache but lead a squadron through a test designed to push every skill, every decision, every instinct to its limits. Her squadron awaited her orders in the hangar, their eyes reflecting a mixture of anticipation and nerves. Avery felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders, heavier than the physical harnesses of the cockpit. Every command, every maneuver, every calculated risk would carry consequences. She was no longer merely reclaiming her career. She was proving once and for all that she was a leader, a strategist, and a pilot unmatched in skill. "Listen up," she began, her voice steady but commanding. "This is the final operational evaluation. The simulation will throw every possible challenge at us: hostile units, environmental hazards, mechanical anomalies. You will follow my lead, but I expect initiative. Hesitation will not be tolerated. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and trust me." As the squadron moved toward their aircraft, Avery climbed into the Apache, running pre-flight checks with mechanical precision. Every switch, every gauge, every panel readout was verified and cross-checked. The hum of the rotors beneath her hands was like a pulse, steady and reassuring. She felt a deep connection with the machine, as if it anticipated her every move, ready to respond to her commands with flawless execution. The first stage of the simulation began with a reconnaissance mission through simulated hostile territory. Enemy units appeared with unpredictable patterns, forcing Avery to constantly adapt. She directed her squadron with calm authority, coordinating maneuvers, prioritizing targets, and maintaining situational awareness with razor-sharp focus. Every action was precise, calculated, and executed with skill honed over years of training. Then came the first surprise, a sudden simulated electrical failure in the Apache's avionics. Avery's hands moved instinctively, compensating for the anomaly while maintaining control of the aircraft and directing her squadron. Sensors indicated multiple simultaneous threats, enemy artillery, civilian zones requiring careful navigation, and squadron members needing guidance. It was chaos, the kind of scenario that would break lesser pilots, but Avery thrived under pressure. "Alpha 1, maintain altitude and cover Bravo 2, she commanded, her voice cutting through the comms with clarity. "Delta 3, flank right. We adjust for mechanical variance. Stay coordinated. Execute now." Her squadron responded, moving in perfect synchronization with her instructions. The Apache's rotors hummed in harmony with her maneuvers, every twist, turn, and adjustment an extension of her will. Even as the simulated environment escalated in complexity, Avery maintained complete control. Her mind processed variables at a speed that left observers stunned. From the observation deck, Keating watched, nodding every decision, every correction, every command. He had orchestrated this scenario to test more than skill. He was testing leadership, resilience, and adaptability, and Avery was exceeding expectations. Riker, however, remained a shadow on the deck, his smirk replaced with tight-lipped disbelief. His subtle attempts to manipulate the exercise, to introduce doubt and hesitation, had failed at every turn. He could see clearly now that his influence had been neutralized. Avery Holt was not just competent, she was extraordinary. Midway through the simulation, a secondary failure was triggered, a hydraulic leak in one of the Apache's control systems. Most pilots would have panicked, losing precious seconds reacting to the alarms. Avery, however, adapted instantly. She rebalanced control surfaces, redistributed power, and adjusted her flight path to maintain stability, all while issuing concise, clear commands to her squadron. Maintain formation, focus on targets, adjust vectors to compensate for variance, execute immediately. The squadron responded, their confidence growing with every successful maneuver. They were no longer questioning her authority. They were relying on it, trusting her instincts, and executing flawlessly under pressure. Avery felt a surge of pride. This was leadership in its purest form, earning respect not by title but by action, skill, and decisive command. As the simulation progressed, enemy forces increased in intensity, environmental hazards multiplied, and communication channels experienced intermittent interference. Avery adapted continuously, her mind processing multiple streams of information simultaneously. Every maneuver was precise, every command authoritative. She was a conductor orchestrating a symphony of chaos, turning potential disaster into tactical mastery. Finally, the simulation reached its climax, a high-speed extraction mission through hostile airspace with multiple targets and civilians in the vicinity. Avery executed every maneuver with precision, coordinating her squadron while compensating for mechanical anomalies and environmental hazards. The Apache responded as if it were an extension of her body, every rotor movement a reflection of her skill and instinct. Landing the Apache flawlessly, Avery felt the weight of the mission lift from her shoulders. The squadron followed suit, executing their landings with disciplined precision. Silence fell over the observation deck, a collective intake of breath acknowledging the magnitude of what had just occurred. Avery had not merely survived the test, she had mastered it. Keating approached, his expression unreadable, then finally allowed a rare smile. "Captain Holt," he said, voice calm but laden with meaning, "you have proven more than competence. You have proven leadership, resilience, adaptability, and authority under extreme pressure. This is exactly why attempts to suppress talent fail." Avery exhaled, a mixture of exhaustion and triumph washing over her. She had reclaimed her cockpit, her authority, and her career. But more importantly, she had demonstrated to the entire base that she was a leader worthy of command. Riker approached afterward, his face pale, lips pressed into a thin line. "You performed well," he admitted begrudgingly. "I can't deny it, but don't think this changes the politics. There are still forces aligned against you." Avery met his gaze steadily. "Politics can't negate skill, Riker. Influence can delay action, but it can't erase competence, authority, or results. You've learned that now." He said nothing further, turning away with a mix of frustration and disbelief. For the first time, Avery realized that her reputation was no longer subject to manipulation. She had earned her authority through action, skill, and resilience, not titles, not influence, not whispered rumors. That night, as she walked across the tarmac, the Apache's rotors spinning down, Avery reflected on the day. Every obstacle, every betrayal, every act of sabotage had strengthened her resolve. She had been tested repeatedly, pushed to the brink, and had emerged victorious. Her authority was recognized, her skill undeniable, and her leadership unquestionable. Yet she knew the war was not over. The political currents, rivalries, and hidden agendas that had attempted to suppress her career were still active. Avery Holt understood that true mastery of her career required constant vigilance, strategic thinking, and unwavering resolve. The desert wind carried the scent of oil, sand, and dust, whispering of challenges still to come. Avery felt the Apache beneath her hands, a machine now inseparable from her identity. She had survived the tests of skill, leadership, and sabotage, but the next mission, the next challenge, would test not just her abilities, but her courage, judgment, and decisiveness in ways she could never anticipate. And somewhere in the shadows, Riker's resentment simmered, his determination to undermine her far from extinguished. Avery Holt knew the final confrontation was inevitable, and she welcomed it. She had fought too hard, endured too much, and trained too long to be stopped now. The desert sky darkened, stars beginning to glimmer faintly above, reflecting the spark of determination in Avery Holt's eyes. She had faced denial, sabotage, and doubt, and survived. But the true test, the one that would define her legacy, was still ahead. The desert air was electric as Avery Holt climbed into the Apache, knowing that this mission was more than a test. It was the culmination of everything she had endured. Months of denial, sabotage, and doubt had led to this moment. Today, she would face her ultimate challenge. A live operational mission under conditions designed to test every skill, decision, and instinct she had honed over years of training. And she knew, deep down, that this mission would also determine her legacy. Her squadron assembled with a disciplined precision that reflected both training and trust. They had seen Avery rise from a grounded pilot to a leader who could command authority, inspire confidence, and navigate chaos. Yet even now, some hesitated, a subtle caution born of past uncertainty and fear of failure. Avery acknowledged their tension but projected unwavering resolve. She had earned her right to lead, not by words but by action. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice cutting through the roar of rotor blades. "This is not just a simulation. Enemy units are active, civilian zones require precision, and mechanical anomalies are a real possibility. We execute with precision, adaptability, and decisiveness. Hesitation will cost lives. Trust your training, your instincts, and me. Follow my lead." She ran through pre-flight checks methodically, each switch, gauge, and readout verified twice. The Apache thrummed beneath her hands, its latent power humming like a heartbeat. She felt the machine as an extension of herself, the culmination of countless hours of training, practice, and instinct. Today, it would be the proving ground of her entire career. The mission began with reconnaissance over hostile terrain. Enemy positions appeared, changing unpredictably, forcing Avery to react instantly. She directed her squadron with calm authority, her voice firm, precise, and unyielding. Each maneuver was a calculation, a balance between aggression and caution, speed and accuracy, leadership and trust. Then, without warning, sabotage struck again. A subtle interference in communications disrupted the flow of commands to one of the squadron units. Sensors indicated a potential failure in her Apache's targeting system. Avery's pulse surged, but her mind remained sharp. She assessed the situation, adapted to maintain operational control, and recalibrated communication with her squadron, restoring cohesion. Delta 2, execute flanking maneuver now. Maintain formation. Alpha 3, compensate for system variance. Focus and move. Her squadron responded immediately. The disruption that could have caused chaos was neutralized by Avery's leadership. Every motion, every command, every adjustment demonstrated why she had earned her place. She was not only a pilot, she was the linchpin of this operation. Midway through the mission, she received an encrypted alert. It was Riker. His influence had not ended. He had attempted to introduce a real-time complication, an unanticipated obstacle requiring instant adaptation. Most pilots would have faltered. Avery did not. Her training, her instincts, and her deep familiarity with the Apache allowed her to navigate the obstacle flawlessly while continuing to coordinate her squadron's movements. She could feel Riker's eyes, somewhere behind the chain of command, watching, waiting for her to fail. But every move she made, every calculated decision, rendered his efforts meaningless. The man who had sought to sabotage her career now bore witness to her undeniable skill and authority. The final stage of the mission was extraction under enemy fire. Civilians were simulated in the extraction zone, requiring split-second judgment to avoid casualties. Enemy units advanced with unpredictable intensity. Avery executed every maneuver with precision, adapting in real time to environmental hazards, mechanical anomalies, and squadron coordination. The Apache's rotors hummed with controlled power beneath her hands, every vibration a reminder of the trust and connection she had forged with the machine. As they approached the extraction zone, an enemy unit simulated a direct attack on her squadron. Avery's instincts kicked in. She executed evasive maneuvers, countered the threat, and guided her squadron to safety, all while maintaining authority, composure, and focus. Her leadership transformed potential disaster into controlled success. The squadron followed her commands flawlessly. Civilians were safely extracted, enemy threats neutralized, and every aspect of the mission executed with exacting precision. When Avery finally landed the Apache, the desert air seemed to still, the hum of rotors fading to silence. The observers in the control tower erupted in approval, acknowledging the extraordinary display of skill, leadership, and resilience. Keating approached, his expression a mixture of pride and satisfaction. "Captain Holt," he said, voice steady, "you have not only completed the mission, you have mastered it. You have demonstrated that competence, leadership, and resilience cannot be suppressed by politics, sabotage, or doubt. Today, you have secured not just your cockpit but your legacy." Avery exhaled deeply, the tension of the mission leaving her body. She had survived the final test, the ultimate challenge. Her authority was unquestioned, her skill undeniable, and her leadership proven beyond doubt. She had reclaimed her career and, more importantly, had proven to herself and the entire military hierarchy that she was exceptional. Riker approached, his face a mask of frustration and reluctant respect. "I underestimated you," he admitted quietly, his voice low. "I won't forget this." Avery met his gaze evenly. Underestimate me again, and you'll see exactly why talent cannot be suppressed. Actions speak louder than politics, Riker. Today proved that. He said nothing further, stepping away with a mix of resentment and acknowledgement. Avery knew the man's ambitions would continue to simmer, but she had neutralized his influence over her career. For the first time, she felt an unshakable sense of triumph. As she climbed down from the Apache, the desert sun casting long shadows across the tarmac, Avery looked at her squadron. Their eyes reflected admiration, trust, and renewed confidence. She had led them through chaos, danger, and uncertainty, and they had emerged stronger, disciplined, and victorious. The base seemed transformed. Where once politics, sabotage, and doubt had threatened to suffocate her career, now respect, recognition, and authority prevailed. Avery had reclaimed not just the machine, but her place in the skies and in the hearts of those she commanded. That night, as she stood alone on the tarmac, the stars beginning to glimmer above the desert, Avery reflected on her journey. She had been grounded, blocked, underestimated, and sabotaged. She had faced betrayal, doubt, and political maneuvering. She had endured setbacks that would have broken lesser pilots. But she had survived. She had triumphed. She had mastered the Apache, reclaimed her authority, and proven herself under the harshest conditions imaginable. Keating's voice came over the secure line later that evening. "Captain Holt, the base has recognized your achievements. Your leadership is unquestioned, your skill undeniable. Today, you've set a standard for what it means to lead, to fly, and to overcome adversity. You've earned your legacy." Avery smiled quietly. For the first time in months, she felt the weight of past struggles lift, replaced by the certainty of accomplishment and purpose. The battles she had fought, against politics, sabotage, and doubt, had forged her into a leader, a master pilot, and a force that could not be contained. In the shadows, Riker's influence lingered, but Avery knew she had neutralized his power over her. She had proven herself not only to him, but to the entire chain of command, her squadron, and most importantly, herself. The desert wind carried the hum of distant rotors and the promise of future flights. Avery Holt had reclaimed her place in the skies, but she also knew that leadership was a journey, not a destination. Challenges would arise, politics would persist, and rivalries would continue, but she was ready. She had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious. And as she looked up at the night sky, filled with stars stretching across the desert horizon, Avery felt a profound sense of clarity. The Apache, the cockpit, the challenges, they were hers. Her destiny was hers. And no one, no politics, no sabotage, no rival could ever take that from her again. The wind whispered through the desert, carrying the sound of distant engines and the promise of countless missions yet to come. Avery Holt had flown, fought, and conquered. She was grounded in nothing but skill, authority, and unbreakable determination. The legacy of the pilot who had been banned, sabotaged, and underestimated was now firmly established, unquestionable, unstoppable, and eternal.